Picture this. It is April of 2012, and we are in a quiet, unassuming suburban neighborhood in Charleston, West Virginia.
Okay.
The kind of place where the rhythms of life are just, steady, predictable, heavily manicured lawns, all of that. But right now, the weather has completely upended that normalcy.
Right, because they were dealing with some insane weather, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. A string of just torrential, relentless rainstorms has battered the area for days. I mean, the rivers are swelling, the creeks are overflowing, and the ground itself is completely saturated.
Like a sponge that just can't hold any more water.
Exactly. The whole city has basically been turned into a soggy, swampy mess. And in one particular backyard, a young man is looking out his window at the garden.
Just checking on the flooding.
Yeah, but he notices the ground is so waterlogged that it's actually starting to give way. A sinkhole is literally forming right there in the middle of his yard.
Which is, it's the kind of atmospheric anomaly that immediately makes your stomach drop. When the literal ground beneath your feet starts to collapse, it is this really visceral reminder that the environment around us is never as stable as we like to pretend it is.
Totally. So he is looking at this depression in the mud, and he notices something down in the muck, something unnatural.
Oh, man.
Yeah. It looks like heavy plastic, maybe a bag of some sort, and it's starting to breach the surface of the soil. So curiosity gets the better of him. He puts on his shoes, trudges out into the pouring rain, and walks over to this swampy sinkhole.
I can just picture the mud like sucking at his boot.
Right. And he reaches down into the freezing mud, grabs the top of this tied-off plastic bag, and just pulls. And it is incredibly heavy. But he manages to drag it up. He opens it to see what's inside, and he immediately recoils in just absolute horror.
Because what he finds in that mud isn't just a body. It's the final piece of a 2-year masterclass in misdirection. It's the grim conclusion to a case that forced investigators to look at how the layers of a person's life can actually be weaponized against the search for them.
Today, we are taking you into the tragic, incredibly perplexing disappearance of a woman named Kathy Goble. We are going to explore a web of secrets, a suspect list that seems to just grow more complicated by the hour, and a series of chaotic red herrings that completely blinded investigators.
There are so many dead ends in this one.
So many. But most importantly, we're going to look at a shocking plot twist involving someone who was hiding in plain sight the entire time.
Right.
But to understand the gruesome discovery in that muddy West Virginia backyard, we need to hit the rewind button. We need to go back 2 years, to April 24, 2010. We have to understand who Kathy Goble was and the incredibly complex, almost secret double life she was leading just beneath the surface of her day-to-day routine.
And that's so critical, because to understand the architecture of this crime, you really have to understand the architecture of the victim's life. Kathy's life was structured in a way that it accidentally laid the perfect groundwork for a completely unsolvable mystery.
So let's talk about Kathy. She's at the center of this. She is 64 years old, and she's working as a sales clerk at a high-end men's clothing store in Charleston.
She'd been there a while, right?
Yeah, she had been working at this specific store for 10 years. And by all accounts, she isn't just an employee there, she is an institution.
Wow.
The staff treats each other like family, but Kathy is the real standout. She has this incredibly magnetic, people-oriented personality. She is so phenomenal at relationship building that men from all over the city will come into this store and specifically ask for Kathy when they need a new suit.
That kind of emotional intelligence is a tremendous skill in high-end retail. But it also speaks to her fundamental character. She's deeply engaging. She draws people in.
Yeah, she has that rare ability to make every single person she talks to feel like they're the most important person in the room.
Which, managing relationships with that high degree of empathy and focus, it requires a massive amount of mental energy. You're essentially curating a specific experience for every single person you interact with.
And she was curating a lot of different experiences, because while her professional life was thriving, her personal life was, it was incredibly crowded.
It really was.
To understand the foundation of the suspect pool that investigators would eventually have to wade through, we have to look at the 3 men who occupied these different, distinct spaces in her life.
Okay, let's break them down.
First, there's the ex-husband, David McCartney. They had been divorced for 2 decades, but they shared 2 adult sons, Jason and Paul. And they actually stayed in touch. In fact, they were quite close.
Which is somewhat unusual after 20 years, but it fits her character.
Right. David had suffered a stroke a few years prior, and while he survived, it really took a toll on his health, his mobility, his memory. He didn't really have anyone living with him to take care of him, so Kathy would frequently stop by his house to help him out.
Just to check in on him.
Yeah, she'd help with chores, remind him to pay bills he might have forgotten, things like that.
That lingering sense of loyalty is fascinating to me. Even 20 years post-divorce, she is maintaining this caregiving role. It really highlights her compassion, but, and this is key from an investigative standpoint, it establishes David as a consistent, ongoing presence in her weekly routine.
Right, he's a fixed point.
Exactly. He is a fixed point in her schedule.
Then, in a completely different lane, we have the boyfriend, Fred. They had been dating for about 2 years, and by all accounts, Fred was a nice guy, and he was ready to take the next step. He had recently proposed to Kathy.
Oh, wow. Did she accept?
No, Kathy was stalling. She was actively on the fence about the whole idea of marriage. I mean, she had already been divorced twice. She loved having her own house. She loved her independence, and she just didn't want to be tied down again.
So she's pulling back.
Yeah, but she couldn't bring herself to break his heart by flat out rejecting him, so she was keeping him in this sort of holding pattern, telling him she needed time to think about it.
You can really feel the underlying tension there. A stalled proposal in a 2-year relationship creates this dynamic of anxiety and expectation on his end and avoidance on hers. She is trying to manage his feelings while fiercely protecting her own autonomy.
Threading a very delicate emotional needle.
Very delicate.
And while she's threading that needle with Fred, she is simultaneously maintaining a secret lover.
And here we go.
Enter Dr. Harry King. He is a wealthy radiologist, and crucially, he is a long-time regular customer at the high-end men's store.
Ah, so they met through work.
Yep. He is married, but he and Kathy are having a very lucrative, secret affair. He showers her with expensive gifts. He actually paid to have her entire kitchen remodeled.
Wait, really? Her whole kitchen?
Her whole kitchen. And just a couple of weeks before our timeline really starts, he took her on this extravagant secret trip across the country to San Francisco.
You have to wonder what the mental load of maintaining that deception feels like. I mean, how did she explain a cross-country trip to her boyfriend?
She told Fred it was just a girl's trip to visit an old friend.
Wow.
Yeah, she felt a little guilty about the lie, but she justified it to herself because she wasn't sure how long things with Fred were going to last anyway. She figured as long as the affair with Harry stayed a secret, nobody would get hurt.
So she's juggling all these completely separate worlds.
She was balancing her independence, a hesitant boyfriend, and a wealthy secret lover, all while being this beloved public-facing figure at her job. I look at this compartmentalization and it reminds me of a submarine.
A submarine.
Yeah, think about it. Kathy built her life like the hull of a submarine. If one compartment flooded, say Fred found out about Harry, she could seal the bulkhead doors and the rest of her life would stay afloat.
Oh, I see.
The problem is, when she goes missing, those sealed bulkheads mean detectives are drowning in isolated rooms, completely unable to see the whole ship. I mean, how does a victim's highly compartmentalized personal life immediately complicate a missing person's investigation from day one?
That submarine analogy is perfect because it gets right to the mechanics of a police investigation. In a standard missing persons case, the very first thing detectives do is build a unified timeline.
Right, figure out the normal routine.
Exactly. They want to understand the victim's baseline behavior. They bring the family and friends into a room, figuratively speaking, and map out the victim's life. But when a victim compartmentalizes their life to this degree, they create what we call information silos.
Information silo.
Right. Fred only has the key to one bulkhead. He knows about the proposal, he knows about her house, but he has absolutely no idea about the kitchen being paid for by another man or the truth about the San Francisco trip.
And Dr. King is in his own silo.
Exactly. Dr. King knows about the affair and the gifts, but he doesn't know the intricacies of her dynamic with Fred or her caregiving routine with David.
Because everyone only knows the highly curated version of Kathy that Kathy allowed them to see.
And this fundamentally breaks the investigative process from hour one. First, it makes establishing a motive nearly impossible. If she vanishes, is the motive jealousy from a boyfriend who found out about an affair? Is it a secret lover trying to silence her to protect his marriage?
You just can't know.
You can't assess the risk factors because the risk factors are intentionally hidden. And second, it breeds suspicion among the innocent. When detectives finally start breaking down those bulkheads and the different parties realize they were being lied to, they get defensive.
Oh, for sure.
A witness who feels foolish or betrayed might withhold information to save face, or they might look incredibly guilty simply because they are shocked by what the police are telling them. It creates this thick fog of confusion right when investigators need absolute clarity.
So Kathy was managing these colliding worlds decently well, keeping all those plates spinning, but on the day she disappeared, a completely different, unexpected element of chaos erupted at her workplace.
Something totally outside the submarine.
Exactly. An element that had nothing to do with any of these three men. We are looking at Saturday, April 24th, 2010.
The day she vanishes.
The morning starts off completely normal. Kathy arrives at the men's store around 9 a.m. She's doing what she does best, helping customers. And one of those customers happens to be Dr. Harry King.
Okay.
She helps him pick out a suit jacket. She helps him try it on in front of the mirror. He loves it. She carries it to the register to ring him up. And while she's doing that, Harry leans over the counter and quietly asks if she wants to go grab lunch.
And she says yes.
She smiles. So sure, and they go on their lunch date. Everything is pleasant. Everything is totally death-line.
It is the picture of routine. The secret affair seamlessly blending into her professional environment. She is entirely in control here.
But it is what happens after she gets back from that lunch break that changes the entire trajectory of the day. About an hour later, Kathy comes back to the store. As she walks in, she notices someone standing at the back by a rack of shirts.
Someone who stands out.
Definitely. It is a young woman, and she immediately stands out. Her clothes are ragged. She looks totally out of place. She is definitely not the typical high-end clientele. Kathy approaches her and realizes it is a woman named Jessica Fisher.
Did she know her?
Yes. Jessica is the daughter of one of Kathy's coworkers.
Ah, okay. This is a severe disruption of the environment then. The atmosphere shifts from comfortable routine to immediate tension.
Because Jessica has a severe drug addiction. She has a history of coming into the store to seek out Kathy specifically.
Not Kathy.
Because Kathy, in the past, out of this misguided sense of pity and perhaps that overarching caregiving instinct she had, would occasionally give Jessica some of her own prescription Xanax.
Oh, wow. So she was enabling her.
She was. But on this particular day, Jessica looks so gaunt, so sick, and so agitated that Kathy finally has a wake-up call. She realizes she is doing real harm. She decides she has to stop enabling this addiction. So when Jessica inevitably asks for the pills, Kathy puts her foot down. She says no.
Establishing a boundary with an addict in active distress, especially in a public space like that, is an incredibly volatile situation.
I can imagine.
You are dealing with someone whose brain chemistry is entirely focused on acquiring a substance. Logic and social decorum just do not apply.
And Jessica does not take the rejection well at all. She starts screaming at Kathy right there on the sales floor.
Just losing it.
Completely. It is a massive public scene. The high-end customers are staring. The peace of the store is totally shattered. It gets so intense that the store manager has to come running over to intervene and de-escalate the situation.
That must have been terrifying.
Eventually, Jessica gives up and flees the store, but the damage is done. Kathy is left deeply, profoundly shaken. This wasn't just a disagreement, it was an aggressive public confrontation.
We have to consider the physiological toll that takes on a person. Kathy is used to being the beloved, charismatic figure in a very controlled, upscale environment. To suddenly be the target of a screaming, unpredictable individual in her own sanctuary, it spikes the adrenaline. The amygdala takes over. Her nervous system is thrown into a fight or flight response, and even after Jessica leaves, that cortisol doesn't just dissipate, it lingers.
And that fear shadows her for the rest of her shift. She can't stop thinking about it. She is terrified that Jessica didn't just leave, but that she is waiting for her outside in the parking lot.
Which is a valid fear.
So when the store closes at 5 p.m., Kathy refuses to walk out to her car alone. She approaches one of her male coworkers, a shoe salesman named Charles March, and she specifically asks him to escort her to her car to protect her from Jessica.
She seeks out a protector from within her trusted environment to shield her from the external threat. This is a very natural human response.
Kathy and Charles walk out the front doors together. The tension is palpable. They are both on high alert, their heads on a swivel, scanning the cars, looking in the shadows, waiting for Jessica to jump out. But nothing happens. The lot is clear. They make it safely to Kathy's silver Honda SUV. She says goodnight to Charles, climbs into the driver's seat, locks all the doors immediately, and just exhales this huge sigh of release.
The threat is gone.
Exactly. She feels safe. She starts the engine and drives away. Now, knowing how this story ends, this moment is steeped in the most tragic irony imaginable. Her immediate fear, her absolute focus was on this chaotic, highly visible threat Jessica screaming in the store.
Right. The obvious monster.
But I am looking at this through the lens of cognitive bias. It feels like a textbook case of unintentional blindness. We hyper-focus on the screaming anomaly, and we become entirely blind to the quiet threat standing 2 feet away.
Inattentional blindness is the exact right framework for this. Our brains are evolutionarily wired to prioritize anomalies. A ragged, screaming person in a quiet high-end store is a massive anomaly. The brain flags it in bright red neon. Danger, focus on this.
Yeah.
And the adrenaline response locks our attention onto that specific target to the exclusion of almost everything else.
We only have so much bandwidth to process danger.
Right, precisely. And the flip side of that evolutionary wiring is how we process our baseline environments. We instinctively drop our guard around familiar faces, familiar routines, and familiar settings. Charles March was a coworker. He belonged in the store. He was part of her baseline.
He wasn't an anomaly.
Exactly. When the brain is hyper-focused on the screaming anomaly outside the door, it completely bypasses any critical assessment of the quiet, familiar person standing right next to you. It creates a dangerous, sometimes fatal blind spot. We equate familiar with safe.
Wow.
Kathy locked the doors of her car to keep the chaotic threat out, not realizing the tragic reality of who she was actually interacting with that day. Predators who hide in plain sight rely entirely on this cognitive bias. They bank on the fact that you were too busy looking for the monster in the bushes to notice the monster holding the umbrella for you.
It's just chilling. With the immediate visible threat of Jessica seemingly behind her, Kathy drives off into the evening. And this brings us to a sequence of events that forms the perplexing final breadcrumb trail of her life.
Let's trace her steps.
Let's look at the timeline of that Saturday evening. First, as soon as she starts her car, she calls her boyfriend, Fred. Fred is actually out of town on a weekend fishing trip.
Okay.
Kathy tells him that she plans to go over to his apartment that night to clean it for him, so it will be nice and tidy when he gets back. Fred tells her she really doesn't have to do that, but she insists.
A detail like this is crucial for investigators building a psychological profile of the victim's final hours. She is planning for the immediate future. She has a task in mind, a mundane domestic chore.
Right, you don't buy cleaning supplies or volunteer to scrub an apartment if you're fleeing the state to start a new life. It completely contradicts any runaway theory.
It anchors her to her normal life. It tells investigators that whatever happened to her was an interruption of her plans, not the execution of them.
She hangs up with Fred and heads to her first stop, the home of her ex-husband, David. Remember, he struggled with his memory after his stroke, so she goes over there and helps him sort through and pay some bills he had forgotten about.
Again, very routine.
She doesn't stay too long, just enough to get the chores done. Then, she leaves David's and swings by a local Walmart. She picks up some food and some cleaning supplies, presumably the supplies she needs for Fred's apartment.
We are seeing a very clear, logical progression of errands here. There is no erratic behavior.
This takes us to about 8:30 p.m. Kathy is back in her SUV, driving toward Fred's apartment. She is on the phone, chatting with a good friend named Laura Henderson. On this call, Kathy sounds totally normal.
Not panic at all.
Not at all. She tells Laura she's actually looking forward to getting to Fred's, doing some cleaning, and just having some quiet alone time for the rest of the night. She eventually pulls up to Fred's apartment, parks in the driveway, and she's still on the phone with Laura. She walks up to the door, starts unlocking it, and then she stops. She tells Laura that someone is walking toward her. She says she has to go. She pushes the apartment door open, and the line goes dead.
Oh, wow. The transition from a casual conversation to an abrupt hang-up, that is the cliffhanger.
It really is.
That is the moment the timeline fractures. When you're looking at phone records, an abrupt end to a call combined with the arrival of an unidentified third party is the exact focal point where a missing persons case usually pivots into a criminal investigation.
And it stays fractured for almost 2 full days.
2 days.
Yeah. Fast forward to Monday morning, April 26th. Kathy's 36-year-old son, Jason McCartney, gets a concerning phone call from his mother's boss. Kathy didn't show up for her morning shift at the store, and she isn't answering her phone.
Which for her is a huge red flag.
For someone as reliable and routine-oriented as Kathy, this is a blaring alarm. Jason immediately drives over to her house. It's on this quiet suburban street. No one answers his knock, so he uses his spare key to get inside. The house is empty. There is no sign of Kathy.
Was anything missing?
Well, her purse, which Jason knows she takes everywhere, is missing. And when he checks the garage, her silver Honda SUV is gone.
Okay, so the primary residence is clear and the vehicle is missing. The next logical step is to check her secondary locations. which means tracing the last known points of contact.
Jason pulls out his phone and calls Fred. Fred had returned from his fishing trip the day before on Sunday. Jason asks if his mom is there. Fred says no.
Right.
In fact, Fred says he hasn't seen or heard from Kathy since she called him on Saturday evening. Jason has this terrible gut feeling that something is very, very wrong. So he calls the police. Specifically, he calls his childhood friend, Detective Brian Karper of the Canard County Sheriff's Department.
Oh, that's a lucky connection.
It is. Karper isn't just a badge. He has known Jason for decades, and he knows Kathy well, too. He knows instantly that this is completely out of character for her. He doesn't wait for a 24-hour rule or anything like that. He immediately springs into action.
Having an investigator who has a personal baseline for the victim is a double-edged sword, but in the crucial first 48 hours, it is mostly an advantage. They don't dismiss the family's concerns as an overreaction. They don't give you the standard, maybe she just needed a break speech. They know the victim's habits, so they can spot the anomalies instantly.
And Karper spots some massive anomalies very quickly. Later that same morning, Detective Karper goes over to Fred's apartment to interview him in person. He knocks, and Fred, this spry, active man in his mid-70s, answers the door and invites him in.
Okay.
They sit down at the kitchen table. Karper asks him to walk through what he knows. Fred repeats that Kathy called him Saturday, saying she was coming over to clean, but when he got back from his fishing trip on Sunday, she wasn't there.
Seems straightforward so far.
But the hairs on the back of Karper's neck start standing up. He looks around the apartment. It isn't just clean. It is scrubbed spotless, top to bottom. Several lights have been left on, and a window is propped open.
Ugh. The setting of the scene implies a flurry of activity, but then an abrupt, unresolved departure. The propped window is especially interesting. It suggests an attempt to air out the apartment, perhaps from the smell of harsh cleaning chemicals.
But that's not the worst of it. Sitting right there on Fred's kitchen counter is Kathy's cell phone, her prescription pill bottle, and her spare set of car keys.
Wait, all three of those things?
All three, sitting right on the counter. I look at this scene, and it feels like a museum exhibit. It feels too perfectly arranged. The apartment is immaculate, yet the victim's most vital tethering items are just left behind on a pedestal like props in a play.
The trinity of essential items. In modern society, you do not leave your phone, your keys, and your medication behind voluntarily.
Exactly. And Karper points this out. He asks Fred, doesn't it strike you as incredibly odd that she is gone, but she left behind her phone, her pills, and her keys? And Fred's response is chilling.
What did he say?
He says, no, it actually wasn't odd. Kathy was sometimes quite forgetful. But as he says this, Fred completely avoids eye contact with the detective, and he refers to her in the past tense. Kathy was forgetful. Not is. Was.
The past tense.
Like, he already knows she's gone forever, even though she's currently only considered a missing person. Karper notices this immediately, pockets the spare keys, and brings Fred in for formal questioning. I mean, put yourself in Detective Karper's shoes. You're staring at Fred, you hear him use the past tense, you see him break eye contact. Every instinct you have as a cop is screaming guilty.
Right.
But as you're about to find out, gut instinct can be totally weaponized against you in a case like this. How much weight do investigators actually put on linguistic slips, like using the past tense when a person is only missing?
This is a massive red flag, and it dictates the direction of the interrogation. But a linguistic slip is not admissible physical evidence. You can't take a past tense verb to a jury and get a conviction.
Right, it's just a feeling.
But in the behavioral profiling phase of an investigation, detectives rely heavily on statement analysis. Statement analysis is looking for the cracks in cognitive load.
The mental weight of maintaining a lie.
Exactly. When a person is telling the truth, they are simply accessing their memory. It is a relatively low-effort process for the brain. But when a person is maintaining a deceptive narrative, especially a high-stakes one involving a major crime, their brain is working in overdrive.
Because they have to remember all the details.
They have to remember what they are supposed to know, what they're not supposed to know, and what the detective already knows. This creates severe cognitive overload. When the brain is overloaded, it tries to find shortcuts to relieve the pressure. Subconsciously, the truth takes less energy to process than a lie.
Wow, so the truth just sort of seeps out.
Right. So if a suspect knows the victim is dead, their subconscious baseline is that the person no longer exists. To speak of them in the present tense requires active, conscious translation. Under pressure, that translation fails, and the truth leaks out. She was forgetful.
And breaking eye contact reinforces that cognitive overload theory, doesn't it?
Completely. Maintaining natural eye contact while lying requires additional mental bandwidth. By looking away, the suspect is literally trying to reduce the incoming stimuli, the detective's scrutinizing face, so they can focus all their processing power on maintaining the lie. When Karhy sees the past tense combined with the broken eye contact, his behavioral radar doesn't just ping, it goes off like an air raid siren. In that moment, Fred transitions from a person of interest to the primary suspect.
And honestly, who could blame him? Fred's linguistic slip gives Karhy a prime suspect, but behavioral tells aren't enough for a warrant. Karhy realizes he needs to trap Fred in a timeline lie, which means he has to cross-reference every phone call Kathy made that night.
Right, to see if anyone else saw her.
That brings him to Laura Hendelson, the friend who was on the phone with Kathy as she pulled up to Fred's apartment. Karhy asks her if anything stood out about the call, and Laura drops an absolute bombshell that changes the entire context of the night.
What did she say?
She tells Karhy that Kathy's exact last words before hanging up were not, "I'm going into Fred's apartment." Her exact words were, "We're going into Fred's apartment.
Yeah.
We're going in."
The shift from singular to plural, that completely fractures the theory that she was ambushed by a stranger in the dark. Whoever she was with, she was comfortable with them in that initial moment. She recognized them.
Just as Karhy is trying to process this revelation, his phone rings. It is a uniformed patrol officer. They have found Kathy's missing silver Honda SUV.
Oh, where was it?
It has been abandoned on the side of a highway about 15 miles outside of town.
15 miles out.
Yeah. Karhy rushes to the scene. He parks, walks up to the car, and what he sees is deeply unsettling. The car is locked tight, and hanging out of the driver's side window is a white towel.
The universal roadside signal for a broken down vehicle. It's a cultural shorthand for distress.
Exactly. There's no sign of Kathy, no blood, no signs of a struggle. Her purse is gone. So Karhy pulls out the spare key he had pocketed from Fred's apartment. He unlocks the door, sits in the driver's seat, puts the key in the ignition, and turns it.
Does it start?
The engine roars to life perfectly. It purrs. He looks at the dash. It has half a tank of gas. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this car.
Interesting.
Karhy deduces what we are all thinking. This is a staged scene. Kathy didn't break down and wander off for help. She was abducted. And someone planted the car here to throw investigators off the scent.
Staging a crime scene.
But if you look at the mechanics of it, bothers me. If you are a killer and you are going through the trouble of trying to fake a vehicle breakdown to throw off the cops, why wouldn't you actually disable the car?
Right.
It feels like the killer was smart enough to know the cultural shorthand of the white towel trick, but they were seemingly too panicked or too rushed or just too lazy to actually drain the gas or slash a tire or pull a wire under the hood.
Well, staging is almost always a hastily constructed illusion, and it's usually done by an amateur. The discrepancy you are pointing out, the towel versus the working engine, reveals the psychological state of the offender at that exact moment. The killer is operating under a massive surge of post-defense adrenaline.
Their brain is just in overdrive.
Right. Their logical executive brain function is severely compromised. They are relying on pop culture knowledge rather than practical mechanics. They know what a breakdown looks like in movies, so they use the towel as a visual prop.
But they don't follow through.
No, because they lack the forethought, the tools, or the steady nerves to make it mechanically convincing. To disable an engine requires time, knowledge, and lingering at a potential crime scene. The killer's primary instinct is flight. They want to create the illusion and escape as quickly as possible. The staged car doesn't show us a criminal mastermind. It shows us a disorganized, panicked mind trying desperately to paint a fake picture before running away.
And the illusion only holds up from a distance. As soon as you get close, it falls apart. Just like the suspect pool, which is getting wider. Karhy goes back to the men's store to interview the coworkers again, armed with the knowledge that Kathy was with someone that night.
Right, looking for the we.
He speaks to the manager, who reveals another secret bulkhead of Kathy's life. She had gone to lunch that day with Dr. Harry King.
Oh, the secret affair comes to light.
Yep. Karhy brings Dr. King in for an interview, and King is a mess. He is visibly nervous, sitting there with his head in his hands. He admits to the affair. He admits to the secret trip to San Francisco. He explains that he didn't come forward immediately when he heard Kathy was missing because he was terrified his wife would find out about the infidelity.
This is a classic investigative hurdle.
Yeah.
Witnesses who hide vital information, not because they are guilty of the crime, but because they are guilty of a moral failing they want to keep secret. It muddies the waters incredibly.
King literally begs Karhy not to call his wife to verify his alibi. But Karhy is investigating a potential murder. He doesn't care about saving a marriage. He calls the wife.
Good for her.
The wife confirms that Harry was at home with her all night on Saturday. Furthermore, she is genuinely devastated and shocked to learn about the affair on this phone call. Her emotional reaction convinces Karhy that she is telling the truth, effectively clearing Dr. King.
You have to verify the alibi, regardless of the collateral damage to personal lives. The moral weight of exposing an affair is heavy, but the alternative is letting a potential murderer walk free because you didn't want to make an uncomfortable phone call.
Exactly. So King is out. What about Jessica Fisher, the ragged young woman who screamed at Kathy over the Xanax?
Right, the screaming anomaly.
Karhy manages to track her down to a cheap motel on the edge of town. He knocks on the door, and Jessica looks awful. She is gaunt, sickly, clearly in the throes of severe addiction. She breaks down crying during the interview. She admits to the fight over the pills, but she swears up and down that after she was escorted out, she left the area and never saw Kathy again.
Did Karhy believe her?
He feels like she's telling the truth, but to be sure, he asks her to take a polygraph test. Jessica agrees. They set a date and time, but when that time comes, Jessica ghosts the police. She goes completely MIA and doesn't show up.
Ghosting a polygraph automatically keeps her on the suspect list, even if her profile suggests she is unlikely to have pulled off a complex abduction and staging. Polygraphs are fascinating because scientifically they are flawed.
They don't actually detect lies, right?
Exactly, they don't detect lies, they detect physiological stress heart rate, respiration, skin conductivity. An addict in withdrawal is going to have a baseline stress level that is off the charts, which might be exactly why she ran. She knew she couldn't pass it, even if she was completely innocent of the murder.
Meanwhile, Kathy's two adult sons, Jason and Paul, both voluntarily come in, take polygraph tests, pass them with flying colors, and are ruled out.
Okay.
So look at where Karhy is at. He has a spotless apartment with abandoned keys. He has a staged car on the highway. He has an explosive public fight with an addict who is now hiding. He has a secret affair exposed. And he has a boyfriend who slipped up and used the past tense.
It's a lot of smoke.
It is a whirlwind of suspicious behavior. But despite all these puzzle pieces, the forensic well ran completely, agonizingly dry.
And that's the real issue. You can have all the circumstantial suspicion in the world, but if the physical evidence doesn't bridge the gap, you are paralyzed.
Let's look at the cold reality of this investigation. Weeks pass. The forensics report on the abandoned SUV finally comes back from the lab. The results: absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
There is no DNA, no blood, no fibers, and no fingerprints from anyone other than Kathy Goble herself.
Wow. The interior of a car is usually a forensic nightmare, but it almost always yields something. To find nothing confirms what we suspected about the staging. Whoever drove that car and left the towel in the window was incredibly careful. They likely wore gloves and wiped down the hard surfaces, the steering wheel, the door handles, the gear shift.
So they were covering their tracks.
Right, it shows a degree of forensic awareness, even if the staging itself was clumsy.
Furthermore, detectives are monitoring all of Kathy's finances. There is zero activity on her bank accounts. Her credit cards haven't been swiped. It becomes undeniable that she hasn't just run off to start a new life. But here is the agonizing legal hurdle that Detective Karhy is facing. He has a robust suspect list. He knows in his gut that Fred is hiding something. He knows Jessica Fisher is unaccounted for, but he has no body.
No.
He has no primary crime scene. He has no murder weapon. And legally speaking, he has absolutely no definitive proof that a murder even occurred.
And this brings us to the principle of corpus delicti, the body of the crime. Historically, the justice system requires proof that a crime has actually occurred before someone can be convicted of it. In the context of a murder, that usually means producing a body.
Because otherwise, how do you know?
Right, the reason for this strict requirement dates back centuries, designed to prevent authorities from coercing false confessions out of suspects for murders that never actually happened or where the victim simply ran away.
That makes sense.
While it is possible in the modern era to get a murder conviction without a body, it is exceptionally rare and requires a mountain of circumstantial evidence, blood in the trunk of a car, a massive financial motive, digital evidence of planning. Karhy simply did not have that. You can't walk into a courtroom and arrest Fred just because he cleaned his apartment and used the past tense. The defense attorney would tear that apart in 5 minutes.
Without evidence, you cannot make an arrest. You can only wait. And so, they waited. Weeks turned into months. Months slowly turned into years. 2 full years pass. The case goes completely, utterly cold.
That's devastating.
Think about the psychological toll of that 2-year gap. Think about the daily despair that her sons, Jason and Paul, must have felt waking up every single day not knowing where their mother was. Think about Detective Karhy, walking past that file on his desk every day, knowing the killer is out there walking free and feeling totally powerless to stop it.
The sons are experiencing what psychologists call ambiguous loss. It is a unique kind of psychological torture. In a standard death, there is a body, a funeral, a clear demarcation line where the mourning process can begin. But with ambiguous loss, there is no closure.
You just keep waiting.
The brain refuses to let go of that tiny, irrational sliver of hope that the person might walk through the door. It suspends the family in a perpetual state of grief and anticipation. They can't move forward because the narrative of their mother's life doesn't have an ending.
It seemed like they would be suspended there forever. Until April 25, 2012. We are bringing the narrative full circle, right back to where we started in the intro. Heavy, unprecedented rains flood the city of Charleston, West Virginia. The rivers peak, the ground turns to mush, and a 911 call comes into the station about a human body unearthed in a shallow grave in a residential backyard on the edge of town.
The sinkhole.
Detective Karhy gets the call. His heart starts racing. He knows, with the instinct of a cop who has been haunted by a case for 2 years, that it has to be Kathy. He rushes to the scene. We always hear these stories about the perfect crime, the meticulous planning of a killer, but nature, a flood, a drought, a shifting landscape, often acts as the final, uncredited detective that breaks a cold case wide open. How exactly does the environment force a secret to the surface like this?
A killer can exert absolute control over a crime scene for a few hours. They can wipe away the fingerprints, they can stage the car, they can scrub the apartment. But they cannot control the environment for years. When a killer chooses to bury a body, especially in a shallow grave, they're fighting a losing battle against chemistry and hydrology.
Okay, break that down for me.
As a body decomposes, it releases specific gases, methane, carbon dioxide, putrescine. These gases chemically alter the pH of the soil above and around the grave. This chemical shift often kills off the natural vegetation, making the soil looser and less structurally sound than the surrounding earth.
The soil literally changes its composition.
Precisely. Then you introduce a weather anomaly, like this unprecedented rainfall. The massive volume of water saturates the soil. Because the soil over the grave is looser and chemically compromised, it absorbs water differently. It loses its density, causing severe erosion, and the hydrology of the flooding literally washes away the concealment, creating a sinkhole.
Wow.
The killer thought they'd bury the evidence permanently, but they only bought themselves a temporary lease from the environment. Eventually, the earth evicts what doesn't belong.
The rain washed away the lie. But the most shocking part of this entire story wasn't how Kathy was found. It was where she was found and who found her. We talked about the young man in the intro, the one who looked out his window, saw the sinkhole, and pulled the plastic bag out of the mud.
Yeah.
That young man was the killer's son. He had no idea what was buried in his own backyard. The house where the body was found belonged to his father. And the homeowner, the man who murdered Kathy Goble, was Charles March.
The man who held the umbrella.
Charles March, the helpful shoe salesman, the coworker from the high-end men's store, the very man that Kathy specifically sought out and asked to walk her to her car at 5 p.m. to keep her safe from the perceived threat of Jessica Fisher. He was the protector.
That is just horrifying.
And here is the most baffling part. In the entire 2-year investigation, with all the suspect interviews, the polygraphs, the deep dives into her personal life, Charles March was never even considered a suspect.
He was a ghost in the machine. He was part of the baseline environment, so he was invisible to the victim, and initially invisible to the investigation. Investigators were so focused on unraveling the complex hidden compartments of her life, the secret lover, the hesitant boyfriend, the chaotic addict, that they completely overlooked the mundane, everyday fixture in her professional life.
Once the body is found on his property, investigators finally look into him, and what they uncover is terrifying. Charles March had a dark past. He had a documented history of stalking women. While working alongside Kathy, watching her charm every man who walked into that store, watching her live this vibrant life, he had grown deeply, dangerously obsessed with her.
Oh, wow.
With his arrest, investigators were finally able to reconstruct the chilling reality of what actually happened on the night of April 24th, 2010.
This is where we see the final tragic intersection of her vulnerability and his opportunity.
Let's walk through it. Charles knew Kathy was going to Fred's apartment that night. He had likely overheard her talking about it at work. or perhaps he was stalking her movements. He drove to Fred's and waited outside in the dark.
Okay.
Around 8:30 p.m., Kathy pulls up in her SUV. She gets out, holding a plastic grocery bag of cleaning supplies, and she has her phone to her ear, talking to Laura. As she walks up to the door, Charles approaches her. This is the person she saw walking toward her.
Right.
Now, she's surprised to see him. She tells Laura someone is coming, but she isn't terrified. Why? Because it's Charles, the guy who just a few hours ago walked her to her car to keep her safe. She trusts him.
She doesn't see him as a threat.
So instead of screaming or running, she continues her phone call, unlocks the apartment door, and gestures for Charles to come inside with her. This is why her final words to Laura were, "We're going in." It wasn't an ambush. It was an invitation born out of misplaced trust.
The ultimate exploitation of a baseline relationship. You didn't have to break her boundaries. She lowered them for him.
Once inside, she sets her things down on the counter. The phone, the keys, the pills. She hangs up with Laura and asks Charles what he's doing there. Charles tells her he wants her to take a drive with him. Kathy is confused, maybe a little wary now, but she agrees.
And she cleans up a bit.
Yeah, she cleans up the apartment a bit, which is why it was spotless when police arrive, and then they leave together. But she leaves her keys and phone behind, likely thinking this is just a quick drive around the block to talk. They get into his car. He drives her out to his house on the edge of town.
Oh, good.
They go inside, and the mask finally drops. Charles propositions her for sex. Kathy, undoubtedly horrified, rejects him. And this rejection sends him into an instant violent rage. He grabs her, ties her up, strangles her to death, and then drags her body outside and buries her in a shallow grave in his own backyard.
And then he goes back, takes her car from Fred's, drives it out to the highway, and stages it with the towel to create the illusion of a breakdown, hoping to redirect the place away from his neighborhood. It was clumsy, but because he was entirely off the police radar, it worked just well enough to stall the investigation.
The aftermath is swift once the truth comes out. Charles March is arrested on April 25, 2012, exactly 2 years to the day after her disappearance was noticed. Faced with the undeniable proof of a body in his yard, he pleads guilty. He is sentenced to life in prison, but he doesn't spend much time there. He dies of cancer in prison just 2 years later, in 2014. I look at Charles March, and the only analogy that fits is a Trojan horse. He used the chaos created by Jessica Fisher in the store as his personal entry ticket. He weaponized Kathy's own instinct for safety against her. She was looking for a shield, and she ended up handing her life over to the sword. So a white knight predator isn't breaking down the door. It sounds like they are essentially hacking the victim's threat response by showing up with a fire extinguisher that they themselves set the fire for. Is that what we're looking at?
That is an incredibly accurate way to frame it. Most predators rely on force, surprise, or physical coercion to overpower a victim. The white knight predator operates differently. They capitalize on a victim's existing distress. They present themselves as the solution to a problem, the calm in the storm, the protector.
Right.
By doing this, they bypass all of the victim's natural defense mechanisms. It's a psychological hack. It creates what psychologists refer to as betrayal trauma. The victim lowers their defenses specifically for the predator, believing they are entering a safe harbor. Kathy's threat assessment wasn't wrong. She correctly identified that Jessica was a disruptive element.
But her trust was misplaced.
Her fatal mistake, which is a mistake any of us would make, was assuming that the person standing next to her in the uniform of a trusted coworker shared her values and had her best interests at heart. Charles March didn't have to break into Fred's apartment. He didn't have to drag her out kicking and screaming. He simply walked through the door she held open for him.
It is deeply, deeply unsettling. It forces you to reevaluate how you interact with the world around you. As we wrap up this journey, let's summarize the incredible, dizzying twists of this investigation. We started with a victim whose life was a series of heavily guarded information silos, built like a submarine to keep her secrets afloat.
Right, the secret lover, the hesitant boyfriend.
We had the secret affair with the wealthy doctor, a relationship that provided motive but ultimately led nowhere. We had the hesitant boyfriend, Fred, whose suspicious behavior all tells the cleaned apartment, the past tense language, the broken eye contact, made him look like a textbook culprit, but who was ultimately completely innocent.
He was just a red herring.
Exactly. We had the frantic, explosive red herring of the screening addict in the store, which set the tone of fear for the day, but was completely unrelated to the murder. We had the staged car on the highway, a clumsy illusion that baffled detectives. And finally, the grim, heartbreaking reality that the actual killer was the man holding the umbrella of protection over the victim. the coworker, the man she trusted to keep her safe.
It is a stark reminder that in investigations, the loudest anomalies are often distractions, and the most dangerous threats are often woven seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life.
Think about the concept of intuition versus situational trust. Kathy Goble's intuition told her she was in danger that day. Her body knew something was wrong. But society trains us to look for the obvious monsters, the screaming person causing a scene, the stranger lurking in the dark alley.
Right.
We are conditioned to trust the familiar, to seek comfort in the mundane. But what if the most dangerous people in our lives aren't the ones creating the chaos? What if they are the quiet ones, the familiar faces, the ones gently offering to walk us through it? It is a chilling question, and it is one that Charles March answered in the most tragic way possible. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. We will see you next time.